The quiet afternoon in our coastal town shattered when I found the thick envelope. There was no return address, just the shaky handwriting I recognized from a wedding invitation sent 7 years ago. The warning on the front chilled me to the bone. It commanded me not to open it in front of his son, to open it alone and call him. My old life was finally demanding its pound of flesh. My name is Brielle Sloan. At 34, I thought I had finally mastered the art of disappearance. Ashford Bay, Oregon, was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where the salt spray and the rhythmic pulse of the Pacific could drown out the echoes of a life I had left in ruins. I had just finished picking up my daughter, Mila, from her primary school. She was only 6, full of untainted laughter and stories about seashells, blissfully unaware of the ghosts her mother carried. As we stepped onto our porch, the serenity of the afternoon evaporated. A thick, manila envelope sat wedged into the doorframe, looking entirely out of place against the weathered cedar. The envelope was sealed with strips of yellowed tape, the kind that had been sitting in a kitchen drawer for a decade. Across the front, written in a cramped, shaky hand that made my stomach do a slow, nauseating flip, were the words I had already read: "Do not open in front of my son. Open alone and call me." Below the warning was a 10-digit phone number, unfamiliar and unlisted in my contacts. I ushered Mila inside, handing her a juice box and turning on her favorite cartoon to distract her. Once I heard the familiar jingle of the television, I retreated to my bedroom. I locked the door. I pulled the heavy curtains shut, plunging the room into a dim, amber twilight. My hands were trembling as I tore through the old tape. 3 items tumbled out onto the quilt. First, a small silver key to a miniature safe. Second, a plastic access card for a facility called Harbor Lock Storage. And third, a scrap of lined paper with a single sentence scrawled on it if you want to know who really took your money. Go in order. The silence of the room was punctured by the sharp, rhythmic vibration of my phone. The screen displayed the same number written on the envelope. I stared at it for 3 rings before I found the courage to slide the bar. "Hello," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own pulse. "I know you think I've vanished." A voice rasped on the other end. It was thin, weary, and punctuated by the sound of a struggle for breath. I recognized it instantly. It was Edwin Kessler, the man who had been my father-in-law for 6 grueling years. "But I still owe a debt to you, and to my granddaughter. Edwin." I felt the cold seep into my bones. "Where have you been? Everyone said you were gone." "Listen to me, Brielle." He cut me off, his voice dropping to a frantic, jagged whisper. "You cannot let Dolores know we spoke. Do not tell Graham. You will not have time to run if they find out I reached you." "Why should I trust you now?" I demanded, my anger flaring through the fear. "You sat there and watched while they stripped me of everything. This feels like another one of their sick games." 7 years ago, Edwin wheezed, the sound of his lungs rattling through the speaker. "In the garden at the Stonegate house. You were crying because you lost your mother's locket. I found it in the hydrangea bushes." "I never told them I gave it back to you. I told them it was lost forever so they wouldn't take it to pay for Graham's debts. Remember, the air left my lungs. That was a secret we had shared in a house full of spies. It was the only moment of genuine kindness I had ever received from a Kessler." "Yeah, meet me at the Driftwood Diner," Edwin said, his voice fading as if the effort of speaking was draining his very soul. "Tonight, at 9 o'clock sharp. Come alone. If you do not show up, you will lose the only thing they have not managed to take from you yet." The line went dead before I could argue. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the envelope so tightly the paper crinkled. Through the door, I could hear Mila giggling at her show. I had spent 2 years building this wall around us, swearing that the Kessler name would never darken our doorstep again. But as I looked at the silver key and the storage card, I realized the wall was an illusion. The past was not behind me. It was standing in my hallway, waiting for me to turn on the lights. 6 years ago, Stonegate, Colorado, looked like a postcard and felt like a coffin. I remember the way the mountain air tasted sharp and cold on the day I married Graham Kessler. He was the perfect gentleman in public, a man who spoke in hushed, respectful tones and held my hand with just the right amount of pressure. I thought I was marrying into a legacy of stability. I did not realize I was being recruited into a cult of three. Our wedding night did not end with champagne and privacy. It ended with Dolores Kessler sitting at the head of the mahogany dining table, tapping a silver pen against a leather-bound notebook. Graham sat beside her, his shoulders slumped, looking like a boy waiting for his report card. In this family, Brielle, we value order above all else, Dolores said, her eyes as cold as the marble countertops. She pushed a typed document toward me. These are the household protocols. To ensure a smooth transition, I will be managing the primary accounts. Both your salary and Graham's will be deposited into the central fund. I will handle the mortgages, the utilities, and the investments. It prevents waste. I looked at Graham, waiting for him to laugh, to tell her she was being ridiculous. He did not even meet my eyes. It is for the best, honey. Really, he muttered. Mom has a system. It makes life so much easier. At the time, I was a senior project manager at Silver Lane Outreach, a boutique communications firm. I was earning nearly $80,000 a year. Yet, every Monday morning, Dolores would place a crisp $50 bill on the kitchen island. For your personal incidentals, she would say with a tight, thin smile. Anything beyond that, you simply provide a receipt for my review. My life became a blur of unpaid labor. I was expected to be awake by 5 o'clock every morning to ensure the house was spotless and breakfast was on the table before the men woke up. I scrubbed floors, ironed Graham's shirts to a razor edge, and prepared 3-course meals, all before rushing to my real job. If I arrived home a minute past the 6 o'clock dinner bell, the house would be thick with a suffocating, stony silence. I am sorry, I had a late meeting, I whispered one evening, my legs aching from standing all day. Dolores did not look up from her plate. A wife who prioritizes her career over her husband's comfort is a wife who has forgotten her place. Do better tomorrow. Brielle. Graham just kept eating his roast beef. She is right, Brielle. You know how she gets about the schedule. The dynamic shifted from cold to calculated when I became pregnant with Mila. I thought a baby would soften the edges of the house. I was wrong. When the doctor announced it was a girl, the disappointment in the room was a physical weight. Dolores did not buy tiny dresses or celebrate. She complained about the cost of a nursery and reminded me that a girl could not carry the Kessler name into the next generation. It is a shame, Dolores remarked one afternoon while I was 7 months along, scrubbing the baseboards because she claimed the maid was insufficient. Graham really needed a son to balance him out. You must have an acidic constitution. I swallowed the insult for the sake of the life growing inside me. I convinced myself that if I worked harder, if I was more obedient, they would eventually love us. I was a fool. I began to notice the discrepancies. On the few occasions I managed to see a stray bank statement, I saw thousands of dollars being funneled into accounts I did not recognize. The first real crack in the facade happened on a Tuesday in October. I was looking for a stapler in Graham's home office when I found a crumpled slip of paper in the wastebasket. It was a receipt for a deposit on a luxury apartment downtown, a place that cost $4,000 a month. The name on the tenant line was not mine. It was someone named Talia Rourke. I felt the room spin. My salary, the money I earned through 10-hour days and missed lunches, was being used to build a life I wasn't part of. I realized then that I wasn't a wife or a partner. I was a revenue stream. I walked to the window and looked out at the Stonegate peaks, realizing that the man sleeping in my bed and the woman ruling the kitchen were not my family. They were my captors, and they were already selling my future piece by piece. The suspicion did not arrive as a sudden thunderclap. It settled over the house like a slow, freezing fog. Graham became a ghost in his own home, his phone never leaving his palm. He changed his passcode, a small but sharp betrayal in a marriage that was supposed to be built on transparency. I would watch him from the kitchen window as he paced the balcony at 10 o'clock at night, his voice a low, frantic murmur against the wind. Meanwhile, Dolores had shifted her tactics. She was suddenly unnervingly generous with Graham, handing him extra cash for new suits and expensive watches, all while reminding me that we needed to tighten our belts for the family's future. The fog lifted for a split second one Saturday morning. Graham had left his phone on the charger while he took a shower. A notification lit up the screen, cutting through the dim light of the bedroom. It was a text from the name I had found on that crumpled receipt. "Don't forget the appointment. I need you." The message read. The sender was Talia Rourke. A younger version of me would have screamed. I would have stormed into that bathroom, ripped back the curtain, and demanded the truth. But the woman I was becoming, the woman forged in the fires of the Kessler household, knew better. I did not make a sound. I took a deep breath, picked up my own phone, and photographed his screen. Then, I went to the kitchen and began making coffee, my movements as precise and mechanical as a clock. I began my own shadow operation. I spent my lunch breaks at Silver Lane Outreach backing up every email, recording every instance of Graham's late nights at the office, and documenting the exact times he returned home smelling of expensive perfume. But the heart of the betrayal was not in a bedroom. It was in the ledger. I spent $40 on a comprehensive credit monitoring service. When the report finally hit my inbox, I had to sit down to keep from fainting. There were 3 credit cards I had never applied for, all opened using my social security number and my maiden name. The total debt was staggering over $15,000 in high-interest loans. The billing address for every single one of them was Dolores Kessler's primary residence. "They aren't just breaking my heart," I whispered to the empty office, my voice trembling with a cold, sharp clarity. They are burying me alive." They were using my identity as a financial shield, a mine they could dig into until there was nothing left but dust. I realized then that if I left now, I would leave with nothing but debt and a ruined reputation. I needed to stay until I had enough to hang them both. I began to play the part of the perfect, broken-down wife. I became softer. I stopped questioning the $50 weekly allowance. I smiled more at dinner. I made sure the house was exactly how Dolores liked it. "You seem much more settled, Brielle," Dolores remarked one evening, sipping her tea. "I'm glad you finally understand that a quiet home is, well, it is a happy home. I just want what is best for the family." "Dolores," I replied, my voice dripping with a fake, honeyed submissiveness. "I realize now that you have always looked out for us. It worked. They got sloppy." I tucked a small, wireless security camera inside a decorative vase near the side entrance, the door Graham used when he thought I was asleep. A week later, Dolores and Graham cornered me in the living room. They looked like 2 vultures eyeing a carcass. "We have an incredible opportunity." "Brielle," Graham said, his eyes bright with a desperate kind of greed. "It is an investment in a new development called Larkspur Capital. We just need you to sign as a guarantor for a small loan. It is just a formality." "Really, a formality?" I asked, feigning hesitation. "How much is the loan?" "Only $50,000. Dolores chimed in, her voice smooth as silk. "It is the key to our long-term security. Think of the baby. Brielle, think of your daughter's future." I need a few days to think about it," I stammered, looking down at my lap to hide the fire in my eyes. "It is a lot of money." The final insult arrived 2 days later. A delivery driver brought a large, gold-foiled gift box to the house. It was addressed to Graham, but the invoice had been tucked into the side pocket by mistake. Inside was a designer handbag worth $3,000. I pulled up my online banking for the account where my salary was deposited, the account Dolores supposedly managed for us. There it was, a transaction for the exact amount, labeled as a business expense. I stood in the hallway, looking at the luxury box that my hard work had paid for a gift for the woman who was helping my husband destroy me. At that moment, I didn't care who Graham loved. I didn't care about their investment. I only cared about the numbers. They had stolen my life, dollar by dollar, and I was going to make sure the interest they paid back was more than they could survive. I did not follow him to the Grand Aspen in downtown Stonegate to cause a scene or to beg for my marriage. I followed him to witness the exact price tag of my dignity. It was 4 in the afternoon when I stood near the marble columns of the lobby, watching my husband emerge from the elevator. He looked more alive than I had seen him in years, his hand resting firmly on the small of Talia Rourke's back. They looked like a portrait of success, funded entirely by my 10-hour workdays. I stepped into their path, my shadow falling over them. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my wedding ring. I looked Graham directly in the eyes, my voice as cold as the mountain air outside. Where did the money for this room come from? Graham! He flinched, his face turning a blotchy, panicked red. What are you doing here? You are acting like a lunatic. Brielle, tracking me down, following me. Talia didn't flinch. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and looked at me with a terrifying, calm sense of superiority. Listen to me, honey. Some women are built for skyscrapers and expensive hotels, and some are only fit for the kitchen. You should go home and scrub something. You look exhausted. I asked a question. Graham, I said, ignoring her. Did that $3,000 handbag she is carrying come from the mortgage fund, or was it from my last bonus check? Get out of here, Brielle, Graham hissed, leaning in close so the hotel staff wouldn't hear. You are embarrassing yourself. We will talk about this at home. But home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. When I arrived, Dolores was already waiting in the living room, a glass of sherry in her hand and a stack of legal documents on the coffee table. She didn't offer an apology. She didn't even acknowledge that her son had been caught red-handed. A wise woman learns to look the other way. Brielle, she said, her voice smooth and dangerous. Men have needs. It is just the way of the world. As long as the Kessler name remains respected in the community, what he does in the dark is irrelevant to you. She pushed the documents toward me. Now, we are done with the theatrics. Sign the guarantee for the $50,000 loan. And we have prepared the deed transfer for that 60-acre plot of land your father left you in Oregon. It needs to be folded into the family trust for tax purposes. It is for Mila's future. I looked at the papers, then at the woman who had spent 6 years trying to erase my soul. No, I said. It was the first time I had ever said that word to her without a tremor in my breath. Excuse me. Dolores leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. I am not signing anything. I am leaving, and I am taking my daughter. Dolores didn't shout. She just smiled, a thin, jagged thing. If you walk out that door without signing, you leave with nothing. No clothes, no car, no money. And I will make sure the courts see you as an unstable, deserting mother. You will be on the street, alone, and you will never see that girl again. I didn't answer. I went to the nursery, picked up a sleeping Mila, and grabbed the one thing I had hidden weeks ago, a plain black file folder tucked behind the water heater in the basement. I walked out into the Colorado night with nothing but my child and my evidence. I fled to Ashford Bay. My old college friend, Sarah, helped me find a tiny, one-bedroom apartment that smelled of salt and damp wood. I changed my number, blocked every Kessler contact, and filed for divorce. I thought the nightmare was over, but the first mediation session 3 months later proved that the Kesslers didn't just want to win, they wanted to destroy. Graham sat across from me, flanked by a high-priced attorney. They presented a series of blurry photographs of me entering a hotel at 2 in the morning with a man. "My client is heartbroken," his lawyer said. "We have witnesses who will testify to Mrs. Sloane's long-standing infidelity. We believe she is an unfit mother and are seeking full custody." I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't panic. I opened my laptop and slid it across the table. "Those photos are from last November," I said. "The man is my regional director, and well, this is the digital security log from Silver Lane Outreach. It shows my keystrokes and login ID at my desk from 10 at night until 4 in the morning on those exact dates. I was working to pay for your client's secret apartment." Then, I played the recording I had made on the night I left. Dolores's voice filled the room, cold and clear. "If you walk out that door without signing, you leave with nothing, and I'll make sure you never see that girl again." The mediator's face hardened. The photos were dismissed. The custody battle swung in my favor, and the judge eventually awarded me primary care of Mila and ordered Graham to pay child support. But the victory felt hollow. The tens of thousands of dollars they had drained from my accounts were labeled as marital spending because of the coerced consent forms I had signed in the early years. I had won my daughter, but I had lost half my life's savings and a piece of my soul. I was free, but I was bleeding. I just didn't know yet that the real war was only beginning. I traded the suffocating mountains of Colorado for the rainy, neon-soaked streets of Portland. Within 18 months, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I threw myself into my work at Northgate Meridian Collective, a strategic consultancy firm that demanded every ounce of my focus. I started as a senior project manager, but I didn't stay there long. My bosses saw a woman who worked like she had everything to lose, and by the time my second year rolled around, I was promoted to director of strategy. I was managing a team of 20 and overseeing budgets that would have made Dolores Kessler's head spin. But the real work happened after 5 o'clock. I spent hundreds of hours in a small, sterile office with a forensic accountant and a high-stakes credit repair specialist named Marcus. We went through the wreckage of my past with a scalpel. "Your credit score has finally climbed back above 720. Brielle," Marcus told me during one of our late-night sessions. "We have successfully disputed the 3 fraudulent cards. The banks have officially acknowledged the identity theft." I can't believe they really thought they could get away with it," I whispered, feeling a tremor in my voice. "They used my social security number like it was, like it was their personal ATM." "They almost did," Marcus replied. "But you kept the receipts. That black file saved your life." I changed more than just my bank accounts. I cut my hair into a sharp, bobbed edge and traded the floral dresses Dolores loved for tailored suits that felt like armor. It wasn't about a makeover for a man. It was a daily reminder that I no longer needed permission to exist. I built a fortress around Mila. Her new school was 3 blocks from my office, and I hired a retired police officer as a part-time driver to ensure she was never alone. I drew a line in the sand that the Kesslers were not allowed to cross. The echoes from Stonegate still reached me, though they were faint and distorted. Through a mutual acquaintance, I heard that Graham had been fired from his firm after a messy internal audit. Rumor had it he was $500,000 in debt. Dolores was reportedly selling off the antique furniture and the silver to keep the lights on in that mausoleum of a house. And Talia, the woman who was fit for skyscrapers, had vanished the moment the luxury handbags stopped appearing. "I won't go back," I told myself every morning. "I won't save them. And I won't waste my energy hating them unless they try to take my peace again." The peace shattered on a Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting in my corner office, sipping black coffee, when an encrypted email landed in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was just one sentence. "If you want to know who really signed your name on the Larkspur Capital loan, look at the beneficiary." I felt a familiar chill. I pulled up my old files on Larkspur Capital, the investment that had ruined my credit. I had always assumed it was Graham's failed attempt at a business venture. But as I dug deeper into the digital trail provided by the anonymous tip, I found something different. The beneficiary of the $50,000 loan wasn't Graham Kessler. It was a shell company called Pinecrest Ledger LLC. My hands began to shake. I was staring at a screen of numbers, trying to map out a betrayal that was far deeper than a simple affair. Just as I was about to call my lawyer, the mail clerk dropped a manila envelope on my desk. It was sealed with old tape and addressed in a shaky hand I hadn't seen in years. It was as if someone had been watching me, waiting for the exact moment I was strong enough to handle the truth before handing me the match to burn it all down. I looked at the envelope, then at the email on my screen. The Kesslers hadn't just used me, they were still using me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. The Driftwood Diner sat on a lonely stretch of Highway 101, a relic of chrome and neon flickering against the damp Oregon night. I arrived exactly at 9 o'clock. The air inside smelled of burnt coffee and old rain. I scanned the back booths, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, until I saw him. Edwin Kessler looked like a ghost that had forgotten how to haunt. He had aged 20 years in the 2 years since I had last seen him. His face was a map of deep, jagged lines, and his hands, resting on the laminate table, were trembling with a rhythmic, neurological tremor. He wasn't missing. He hadn't vanished into a luxury retirement as Dolores had told the neighbors in Stonegate. He had been erased. "You came," he whispered. His voice was a dry rattle, as if his throat were lined with sandpaper. You look ill." "Edwin," I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. I didn't reach for his hand. I couldn't. "Dolores told everyone you went to a private facility in Arizona for your memory. She said you didn't want to see anyone." Edwin let out a hollow, bitter laugh that turned into a coughing fit. He pressed a tattered handkerchief to his mouth. "Arizona, no. I was in the basement suite of the house. They took my phone, my keys, my dignity. They told the doctors I was losing my mind so they could take over the power of attorney. I had to wait for a new nurse, a girl who wasn't on their payroll, to help me get out." "Why did they do it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because I found the ledgers. Brielle, years ago. I caught them. Dolores and Graham. They were forging my signature to drain the family trust, not just small amounts. We are talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I threatened to go to the authorities, they turned the world against me. They made me a prisoner in my own home." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, hand-drawn diagram. He pushed it toward me along with a heavy brass key. "This is for a unit at Harborlock Storage. Inside, you will find a hard drive, copies of the forged documents, and a letter. I wrote it for the day you were strong enough to use it." I looked at the key, feeling the cold weight of it. "Graham told me the money was lost in bad investments. He said the Larkspur loan was just a mistake." "There was no mistake," Edwin rasped, leaning forward until his eyes, sharp and burning with a frantic clarity, were inches from mine. "And Talia. She was never just a mistress. She is a professional. Brielle. She is bait. They brought her in to help move the money through different accounts. She has accomplices in the local banks. They have done this before." The room seemed to tilt. "You mean—" "It wasn't just about the affair. Brielle, do you really think they only wanted your salary? No. They used your name and your clean credit history to hide a criminal ring. You were their shadow. Every illegal transaction, every laundered dollar. It has your signature on it. They were building a cage around you while you were busy making them dinner." "Why help me now?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You let them do it for years." Edwin closed his eyes for a moment, his breathing shallow and jagged. Because you were the only one who didn't look at me like a bank account. You treated me like a human being, and because of Mila, She deserves a mother who isn't sitting in a federal prison for crimes she didn't commit. He gripped my wrist, his fingers cold and bony. Do not tell Graham you saw me. Do not tell him I am alive. If Dolores finds out, they will find a way to make me sign a final waiver, a total surrender of my rights. Then it really is over. As I stood up to leave, he pressed a small, torn scrap of paper into my palm. If they corner you, if you feel the walls closing in, call this man. Ask for Special Agent Klein. I walked out into the cold Oregon air, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I had come to this diner looking for answers about a failed marriage. Instead, I had discovered I was a pawn in a systemic hunt. I wasn't just a divorced mother anymore. I was a witness. And the people I had once called family were far more dangerous than I had ever dared to imagine. The metallic groan of the shutter at Harbor Lock Storage echoed through the hollow hallway like a death knell. My hands were slick with sweat as I turned Edwin's heavy brass key. Inside the small, climate-controlled unit, I found a single plastic crate tucked under a tattered moving blanket. It was a treasure chest of betrayal. I pulled out a thick stack of loan contracts, every one of them bearing a perfect, chilling imitation of my signature. There were bank statements from accounts I never knew existed and, at the very bottom, an encrypted hard drive with a sticky note labeled, "The Insurance Policy." I plugged the accompanying thumb drive into my laptop and clicked on the only video file. The image was grainy, recorded from a hidden shelf in the Stonegate Library. It was Dolores. She was sitting at her desk, her voice sharp and clinical as she spoke to someone off camera. "Make sure the Pinecrest accounts are zeroed out before the audit," she snapped. "If Brielle ever asks about the discrepancy in her tax filings, tell her it was a standard adjustment. If she pushes, well, just remind her how much we have done for her daughter." I didn't wait. I took the drive to a digital forensics expert in downtown Portland. 2 days later, he handed me a report that laid out the skeleton of their scheme. Pinecrest Ledger LLC was a shell company designed for one purpose: to wash dirty money through my clean credit history. Every dollar they stole from my salary had been cycled through Pinecrest to pay off high-interest debts that Graham had accrued in illegal offshore gambling. I was still reeling from the discovery when I walked out of my office on Friday afternoon and saw a ghost standing by my car. Graham looked pathetic. He had lost weight. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed. I just wanted to see her. "Brielle," he said, his voice cracking with a calculated tremor. "I miss our daughter so much. I have made so many mistakes. God, I just want us to be a family again. Can we just sit down and talk? Stay away from me." "Graham," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and fear. "The court order says you have to give 48 hours notice. You are in violation." "Please." He stepped closer, reaching for my arm. "I am a different man now. I have changed." I pushed past him and locked myself in the car. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was Dolores. Her voice was a ragged, desperate sob that sounded so authentic it almost made me forget she was a monster. "Brielle, please, you have to help us," she wailed. "Graham is in terrible trouble. There are people, dangerous people, looking for him because of those Pinecrest debts. Just sign the release for the Oregon Land Trust. Just once. For Mila's safety. Help us." The script was perfect. Too perfect. I ignored her, but the dread in my chest only tightened when I looked at my dashcam footage that night. A dark blue sedan had been following me for 3 days. I checked the license plate through a contact Sarah had in the local precinct. It belonged to a rental agency in Stonegate. They hadn't sent an assassin. They had sent a private investigator. The next morning, the other shoe dropped. My lawyer called, her voice tight with urgency. "Brielle, you need to come in. The Kesslers just filed an emergency petition to modify custody. They are accusing you of hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars in offshore accounts, the Pinecrest accounts. They are claiming you are using the money to prepare to flee the country with Mila. They are asking for a total freeze on your assets and immediate temporary custody. I felt the air leave my lungs. They weren't using a knife. They were using the system. They were going to use the very crimes they committed against me to steal my child. My phone buzzed again. A text from Edwin. It was short and jagged. They know. Run. I tried to call him back immediately, but the line went straight to a disconnected signal. My father-in-law had gone dark. I stood in my kitchen, looking at Mila as she colored at the table, unaware that her grandmother and father were at this very moment trying to rip her away. I had a choice. I could hide the evidence and try to fight them in a slow, civil battle while they bled me dry. Or I could release the hard drive now and risk them disappearing or destroying Edwin before the authorities could move. If I moved too soon, I would lose my witness. If I waited, I would lose my daughter. I have to do it, I whispered, my hand hovering over the contact for Special Agent Klein. I have to end this tonight. I grabbed my coat and my black file. The trap had closed, but they had forgotten one thing when you corner someone who has already lost everything once. They don't just fight for survival, they fight for blood. My hands did not shake when I dialed the number Edwin had given me. Special Agent Klein did not sound like a hero. He sounded like a man who had spent too many years staring at spreadsheets and cold coffee. However, the moment I mentioned the name Pinecrest Ledger, the line went deathly silent. It turned out that the federal authorities had been sniffing around the Kesslers for months, but they lacked the internal keys to unlock the vault. I was that key. I did not just dump the files onto his desk. I spent 6 hours in a windowless room with Klein and my attorney, establishing a chain of custody that would hold up in a federal court. We verified every digital signature and cross-referenced every bank statement from the Harbor Lock unit. We were not just showing a crime, we were proving a surgical, years-long pattern of financial identity theft. While Klein handled the criminal side, my lawyer, Ava, worked through the night to counter the emergency custody petition. We gathered every missed visit Graham had ever recorded, every aggressive text message, and the recordings of Dolores's threats. We were building a wall of truth around Mila that no Kessler lie could penetrate. Talia Rourke isn't even her real name, Klein said, leaning over the table and sliding a folder toward me. She is what we call a professional money mule. She has pulled this exact stunt in Florida and Illinois under 4 different aliases. She does not just sleep with men like Graham, she cleans their accounts and moves the proceeds through shell companies for a cut of the profit. She is a specialist, Brielle. So Graham was, well, he was just a tool for her. I asked, a bitter taste in my mouth. Exactly, Klein replied. But he was a willing tool. He provided the names and the social security numbers. He provided you. I decided to give the Kesslers exactly what they were hunting for, a target. Through my firm's connections, I set up a restricted business account with a visible balance of $200,000 linked to a fictitious development project. I let the word slip through a mutual contact that I was finally feeling the pressure and was ready to negotiate a settlement to keep my career intact. The response was almost instantaneous. My phone lit up with a message from Graham at 10 at night. It was the smoking gun we needed. I know about the new account, Brielle. The text read, "You have been hiding money while I struggle. I can make the custody case go away tomorrow. Just sign the land transfer for the 60-acre plot in Oregon, and I will withdraw the petition. It is a fair trade for our daughter's peace of mind. Do you understand?" I did not reply. I printed the message and handed it to Ava. It was a textbook confession of extortion. I immediately filed for an updated restraining order and hand-delivered a copy of the legal notice to Mila's school. I made sure every administrator knew that under no circumstances was anyone from the Kessler family allowed within 500 feet of her. But the victory was short-lived. Just as I was leaving the station, Klein walked back into the lobby, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. "Edwin is at the Cedar Line Medical Pavilion," he said, his voice low. "The official report says he had an accidental fall, but the preliminary tox screen shows dangerously high levels of sedatives he was never prescribed. He is fading. Brielle. But he keeps whispering your name. He says the envelope was only the first shot. He says he has the bullet." I felt the air leave my lungs. The Kesslers were terrified. They were trying to silence the one man who could put them away for the rest of their lives. I realized then that the manila envelope was just a warning. The real truth, the evidence that would finally end this war, was waiting in a sterile hospital room. I did not have days or even weeks. I had hours before the people I once called family finished what they started. "Take me there," I said to Klein, my voice as sharp as a scalpel. "Now." The air inside Cedar Line Medical Pavilion was thick with the scent of antiseptic and dying hope. I found Edwin in room 412, a frail shadow of the man who had once tried to protect me in secret. He was hooked to a dozen monitors, their rhythmic beeping the only thing keeping the silence at bay. When he saw me, his eyes cleared for a moment, and he reached out with a hand that felt like dry parchment. "If I do not make it, please, make sure they never touch Mila," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "I have her. Edwin," I said, squeezing his hand. "She is safe, I promise you." He used the last of his strength to pull a heavy, cream-colored envelope from under his pillow. This was the second shot. This is the revised will. And the trust. I moved everything I could. A significant portion is for Mila. But I put a lock on it. Graham cannot touch a single cent. He has no management rights. None until she turns 25. He closed his eyes, his breathing coming in shallow, jagged bursts. "I have to tell you the truth, Brielle. The money they took from you, the $100,000 over the years. It was not just for Graham's games or that woman. He signed for a series of fraudulent loans. He was in deep. Dolores. She was the one who held the leash. She forced you to hand over your salary so she could use your clean funds to plug the holes in the family trust. She was hiding his crimes with your hard work." I felt a cold, sharp anger crystallize in my chest. I wasn't just a victim of a cheating husband. I was the human shield for a matriarch's vanity. "Dolores was the architect," I asked. "Always," Edwin whispered. "She would rather destroy you than let the Kessler name be tarnished by a bankruptcy or a scandal." I stepped out into the hallway to catch my breath, and my phone began to vibrate. "It was Dolores," I answered, keeping my voice flat. "Brielle, dear," she said, her voice dripping with a fake, honeyed sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I heard you were at the pavilion. It is such a tragedy about Edwin. But listen to me. You must not take anything he says to heart. The medications, they make him hallucinate. Do not let Edwin talk nonsense. He is confused. His mind is failing him. Just come home, and we can settle everything like a family." "I am not your family, Dolores," I said, "and Edwin is the only person in that house who ever told the truth." I hung up before she could respond. Special Agent Klein was waiting at the end of the corridor, his face grim. "We are getting the search warrants ready, but we have a timing issue. If Edwin passes away before he can sign the formal affidavit for the civil court, our leverage for the asset recovery weakens. We need a confession from the others to seal the deal." Just then, an email notification popped up on my phone. It was from Talia Rourke. It was a desperate, frantic plea for a meeting. "I have the ledgers for Pinecrest Ledger," she wrote. "I will give you Graham and Dolores on a silver platter if you pay for my protection. I need $50,000 and a ticket out of here." They are going to kill me. Brielle. I looked at Klein. I saw the desperation in everyone around me. They all wanted to use me as a buoy to save themselves from the sinking ship they had built. I realized then that I didn't need to choose a side. I only needed to provide the stage. I am not paying her a dime, I told Klein. But we are going to give them exactly what they want, a meeting. Set it up for tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at your office. I want Talia there, I want Graham, and I want Dolores. We are going to let the truth do the killing for us. I went back into the room and watched Edwin sleep. He was the only one who had tried to save a piece of his soul. As for the rest of them, they were about to find out that the woman they had spent 6 years breaking was finally whole, and she was done playing her part in their theater of lies. The air in the sterile conference room in downtown Portland was cold enough to frost glass. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, my hands folded calmly over my black file. Graham and Dolores sat opposite me. Graham looked like a man who had been hollowed out, while Dolores remained upright, her pearls gleaming like shark teeth. Talia Rourke walked in 10 minutes late, her makeup perfect as if she were stepping onto a movie set, but her eyes were darting toward the exits. She was vibrating with a silent, frantic energy. Talia tried to seize the room before anyone could speak. "I have the digital ledgers," she said, her voice high and brittle. "I can give you everything, Brielle. But I want $50,000 and a signed immunity agreement. If I do not get it, I walk." Special Agent Klein, who was sitting beside me in a plain gray suit under the guise of my financial consultant, leaned forward. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Talia. "You aren't in a position to negotiate, Miss Rourke. We already have the Pinecrest servers. Do you want to cooperate and save 5 years of your life, or do you want to be prosecuted for federal wire fraud and identity theft?" Talia went rigid, the blood draining from her perfectly contoured cheeks. I was just following Graham's lead," she stammered, her voice beginning to shake. "He gave me the Social Security numbers. He told me it was all legal." "You lying bitch!" Graham exploded, slamming his fist on the table. "You told me you knew a way to fix the debts. You targeted me. I was a victim." I didn't know she was using Brielle's name. "Be quiet, Graham," Dolores snapped, her voice like a whip. She turned her icy gaze on me. "You ungrateful, selfish girl. You have spent years trying to tear this family apart. You are a common thief, trying to steal our legacy and keep my granddaughter from her rightful family. We will see you in court, and I will make sure you never work in this state again." I didn't blink. I reached into my bag and placed Edwin's second envelope on the table. I slid the revised will and the handwritten confession toward the center. "This is from Edwin," I said. "He signed it yesterday afternoon with 3 witnesses present." I read the letter aloud, my voice steady and unwavering. Edwin's words were a death sentence for their facade. He described in surgical detail how Dolores had orchestrated the entire scheme, how she had coerced me into handing over my salary to wash the stolen funds from the family trust, and how Graham had knowingly used my identity to secure $50,000 loans for his gambling debts. Dolores let out a guttural sound and lunged across the table, her fingers clawing for the paper. "That old man is senile. He is a liar. You stole that from him." At that exact moment, the heavy oak doors of the office swung open. 2 investigators from the Federal Bureau stepped in, followed by a team of local police. "Dolores Kessler, Graham Kessler. We have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic devices and financial records. You are under investigation for conspiracy to commit financial fraud and aggravated identity theft." The room froze. As the investigators began bagging phones and laptops, Klein turned back to Talia. "One more thing. Miss Rourke, we have your medical records from the clinic in Stonegate. You were never pregnant. Were you—" The silence that followed was deafening. Talia looked down at her lap, her silence a confession. Dolores turned to her son's mistress, her face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. What but? You said there was a son. You said the Kessler name was safe. I needed the money. Dolores, Talia whispered, her voice finally breaking. There was never a baby. I just told you what you wanted to hear so you would keep paying the rent. Dolores Kessler, the woman who had ruled Stonegate with an iron fist and a silver tongue, collapsed into her chair. The legacy she had sacrificed my life to protect had been built on a foundation of sand and a mistress's lie. The aftermath was a blur of legal victories. The court dismissed the custody petition within 24 hours, citing Graham's systemic abuse of the legal process. I was granted a permanent protective order and full, unchallenged custody of Mila. Edwin recovered enough to sign the final trust documents, ensuring that Mila's inheritance was locked in a private fund that no Kessler could ever touch. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I simply reclaimed the life they had tried to bury. A week later, I stood outside Mila's school as the afternoon sun dipped below the Oregon pines. I watched her run toward me, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. We walked past a large billboard for a corporate ethics firm. The words "Integrity is everything" plastered in bold letters. I didn't feel the need to scream my victory from the rooftops or gloat over their ruin. The most civilized revenge was simply living well. I took Mila's hand in mine and walked toward the car, finally clean, finally free, and never looking back. Thank you for listening to this story. Please comment below to let us know where you are listening from, so we can interact and share thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like the video, and support us by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.